Okay, here we are for the frozen pie contest of the year. And the opponents are Mrs. Smith, flaky crust, real butter, apple pie. The opponent is Sara Lee Apple pie, orchard, picked apples. But before we get started, a few rules. We want this to be a fair fight, a clean fight. And we're going to be judged on flakiness, appearance, taste, texture, the amount of apples. It's going to be a great fight. But first, a weigh-in. Mrs. Smith weighing in at 37 ounces. Sara Lee weighing in at 34 ounces. Let's get this contest going. Let's start the judging by looking at how the pie was packaged. Now, Mrs. Smith pie, what I liked about her is that she did have her pie shrink wrapped in some plastic. I think that kept the freshness. We'll see. However, Sara Lee chose not to put any type of internal wrapping around her pie. So here are the two pies as they came out the oven. This pie is the Sara Lee pie. This pie is the Mrs. Smith pie. I'm going to slice these up and sit down and start tasting. So first, let's look at the flakiness. Now, this is Mrs. Smith pie. And actually, the layers are flaking. So this is pretty flaky. You can see even the top layer. Now, the Mrs. Smith crust has some butter in it that may have something to do with it. Here's the Sara Lee pie. It's a nice uniform crust. There's some flakiness, but I'm thinking that Mrs. Smith has beat on the flakiness category. Now I'm going to taste it. I'm going to start with the Sara Lee. That's Sara Lee. It's your good basic pie. I think the bottom crust is has a little bit of gumminess to it when I taste it. But the apples, you can see the seasoning in it. I'm tasting a little bit more of that apple in the Sara Lee. The apples are tasty. It has a good amount of sweetness. The texture is pretty good. Let me drink some water to rinse my mouth before I taste Mrs. Smith. So this is Mrs. Smith. That crust is really good. I don't have the gumminess in a Mrs. Smith pie. Nice, crisp, nice bottom, nice top crust. The apples are a little firmer, but I kind of like that. And the flavor is really good. I'm not sure. They have some type of additional flavor that's pretty good in Mrs. Smith. That's good. So for the taste, I'm going to give it to Mrs. Smith. Now let's look at the amount of apples in here. I'm going to say that Sara Lee seems to have more solid pieces of apples in there, so I'm going to give it to her for the amount of apples. Now, Mrs. Smith apples, not as much apple, but it has a really good sauce that they have in there as part of the apple. I think that's good. I think they both had good textures. As far as appearance, Mrs. Smith has that kind of crumbly looking top to it when it baked. That doesn't bother me. To me, that kind of looks more homemade. However, I think most people are used to this kind of unified crust on the top. And I think that's probably better for the appearance of the pie. So I'm going to give it to Sara Lee as far as the appearance. As far as the texture, I do like the texture of Mrs. Smith pie, even though they both had good textures. And so based on what I'm looking and observing and tasting, Mrs. Smith pie wins the competition. Even though they're both are very good brands, and of course, because they've been around for a while and each one has their followers, I'm going to say that Mrs. Smith wins the pie challenge. All right, that's it for now. Bye-bye.